In this video, we're going to be switching gears from area and surface area onto volume, and we're going to start with volume of prism. So our essential questions are, what is volume and how do you find the volume of a prism? Well, what is volume? Volume is the space inside a three-dimensional solid, and that is called volume. So how do we measure volume? How do we measure space inside of a shape? Well, we measure it with cubes. So if you can imagine how many cubes would fit inside of a solid, that's what we're talking about when we talk about volume. So if you're looking at this stack of cubes here, how many centimeter cubes are in this prism? So every one of these cubes here is 1 centimeter on each side. How many of them are there total in the whole shape? Well, one way to figure that out would be to look at how long, how wide, and how tall this prism is. So if you're looking at this prism and you count the blocks, we have 4 blocks wide, we have 5 blocks long, and it's 3 blocks tall. So to find out how many cubes there are total in this prism, we would take 4 times 5. That would tell us how many cubes were on this bottom layer, and then multiply that by the 3 layers times 3. 4 times 5 times 3 would tell me how many cubes there are total, and 4 times 5 times 3 is 60. So I have 60 centimeter cubes in this prism, and that is essentially its volume. How many cubes would fit inside this prism? So if I'm imagining a prism here, it would fit 60 centimeter cubes inside of it. And that's how we would measure volume. We measure it with cubes, so we use the phrase cubic. So this would be cubic centimeters. So just to review our types of measurements here and the labels we use, when we're talking about lengths, we talk about centimeters, meters, feet, inches, and so on. And then when we talk about area, we talk about squares, or how many squares it takes to cover something. So we say centimeters squared, or square centimeters, meters squared, or square meters, and so on. But now when we're talking about volume, we're talking about cubes. So our label is now changing. So we're talking about centimeters cubed, or sometimes said cubic centimeters, cubic meters, cubic feet, or cubic inches. So now our label is going to change from area to volume. So specifically, how do you find the volume of a rectangular prism? Well, for any prism, the volume is going to be the area of the base times the height. Just like we did with our prism of cubes, we found out how many cubes would fit on that bottom layer, or the base, and then you multiply that by the height, or how many layers there are. So to find the volume of any rectangular prism, it's the area of the base times its height. And the area of the base is always length times width of a rectangular prism. So we can start with this general formula for volume of prisms. Volume equals area of the base times its height. But the area of the base is always length times width on a rectangular prism. So we get this formula for the volume of a rectangular prism is length times width times height. So let's take a look at a couple of rectangular prisms here, and the volume is going to be the area of the base times the height. So our base is here, which is a 5 by 4 centimeter rectangle. So the area of the base is going to be length times width, or 5 times 4. And then we're going to multiply that by the height of the prism, which is 3 centimeters. So 5 times 4 times 3 is, as we saw in the first example, 60 centimeters cubed, or 60 cubic centimeters. So that's the volume of that prism. This prism, again, we're going to find the area of the base and multiply it by its height. So the base is a 9.5 by 5 meter rectangle. So the area of the base is going to be length times width, or 9.5 times 5. And then we're going to multiply that by the height, which is 3 meters. So 9.5 times 5 times 3, and that gives you 142.5 meters cubed, or cubic meters of space inside that prism. And that's rectangular prisms. What if you have something besides a rectangle as the base of your prism? Let's talk about triangular prisms. And again, same concept applies. We're going to find the area of the base and multiply it by the height of the prism. Now the base is a triangle, so you have to remember, how do you find the area of a triangle? That's base times height divided by 2, or 1/2 base times height. So again, the volume is still area of the base times height, but now the base is a different shape. So the formula changes a little bit as compared to a rectangular prism. So we're going to take base times height, and this is the height of the triangle, not the height of the prism. So this gets a little bit confusing when it comes to triangular prisms, because there are actually two heights that are labeled: the height of the triangle base and the actual height of the prism itself. So when we're finding the area of the base, we're using the height of the triangle, not the height of the prism. So that's base times height divided by 2, and then we multiply by the height of the prism. The triangles are always the bases, no matter how the prism lays. Okay, if it's this prism we're laying down flat on its rectangle side, so it kind of looked like a tent, the triangles are still the base. Don't automatically call the bottom shape the base when we're talking about triangular prisms. The triangles are always the bases. So let's take a look at some examples of these and try to find their volumes. So the volume of this triangular prism is going to be area of the base times the height. Now the base is not the bottom rectangle. The base is one of these triangles. So I need to find this area right here, not the area of the rectangle that's on the bottom. The area of the base is the area of the triangle, no matter how the prism is laying. So area of the base, area of this triangle is going to be base times height divided by 2, or 1/2 base times height. I'll use 1/2 base times height. And then I'm going to multiply that by the height of the prism. Now, the height of the prism is going to be the distance between the two bases, or the 9 feet, even though it isn't up and down. Imagine setting this prism up on its triangle base, and that will tell you what the height is. The height here is 9 feet. It gets kind of confusing when they use words like height, even though it's not up and down. So here is how I'm going to find the volume of this triangular prism. So 1/2 times 6 times 8 times 9, and that gives me 219 feet cubed, or cubic feet. And then the same for this next triangular prism. The triangle shape is the base, so this is what I'm focused on right now, is the area of this base, the area of this triangle, which is 1/2 base times height. So the area of the base is going to be 1/2 4 times 5, since 5 is the height of the triangle base. And then I'm going to multiply by the height of the prism. So again, I'm imagining setting this prism up on its triangle base. It would be 7 inches tall if I did that. So that's the height of the prism. Now I just have to do the computation. 1/2 times 4 times 5 times 7 is 70 inches cubed, or 70 cubic inches. And that is the volume of our triangular prism. So we're just going to be talking about rectangular prisms and triangular prisms in this video. But again, the general formula is always just the area of the base times the height. How many cubes fit in the bottom layer times how many layers there are.